The most important idea behind what makes an extraordinary presentation is change. If there is no change to the audience, don't bother. The single most important aspect of giving an effective presentation is to understand from the beginning, what change do I want to try to help my audience go through? And if I know that, if I want to change their actions, I know which story to tell them. If I want to change their information, maybe I just give them a report, a more dry story. And if I want to change how they believe things, then I'm going to pull out the big guns. I'm going to give them a full-on drama. Understanding the change tells me which story to tell. The 3 rules of a great presentation. The first one is tell the truth. It's amazing how powerful that is. I think we have like a 6th sense as people when we're seeing someone on stage. When they're BSing us, we know it. So no spin, no BS, tell the truth. Second rule is tell that truth with a story. And it's amazing, if you lead with a story, people's understanding will follow you for as long as you want to go. And rule number 3 is tell that story with a picture. If we draw a little picture, or if we have a nice photograph, or if we have even, heaven forbid, some kind of nice chart, the fact that we're activating our audience's visual mind will make our presentation just flow right into their brain. People love it. A good story does 2 things. It takes us from a beginning over here over to an end, and something has to happen along the way. But a really, really great story ends up here. So we start at one point, bad things happen, but we end up here. There's any number of ways we can get to that better point. But a good story is one that starts us here and gets us to a higher point at the end. It is a fact that more of our brain is activated in processing vision than any other thing that we do. And we do ourselves and our audience a grave disservice when we simply give them nothing to look at. Because let's face it, if we're up there doing a presentation and we've got our bullet list and we're on stage and we're talking through them, it is not our audience's fault that they're going to check out after about 3 minutes. It's their brain's fault, because our visual mind, which takes up so much, is hungry for things to look at. And if there's nothing interesting to look at, that visual mind is just gonna check out. And it's very simple how to fix that. Show something interesting. Show a picture, and even more. What's really good is while we're showing a picture, if we show the eye what to look at. Hey, eye, look over here. Eye, follow me as I go over here, because I want to take you to the end. The act of movement is so captivating to our visual mind that we can keep people sitting in their seats watching us for hours if we continually illustrate what we want them to be looking at. The way we select which pictures to show is by simply translating what we're talking about into its visual form. Now, what I mean by that, that sounds kind of complicated, but it's not. In all my books, the central issue, the thing that I've discovered and I'm very happy about, is something that I'm beginning to call a kind of a sense of visual grammar. And what that means is, look, we remember when we were in school and we were learning how to talk. We had to learn all of these tools about grammar. We had to learn first the alphabet, and then vocabulary and spelling, and then we got the basics of grammar, and then we got syntax, and depending on our language, maybe we had conjugations and declinations, and then it expanded to where we're writing 5-paragraph essays. The point is, verbal communication and verbal thinking is assisted by a whole set of tools that we've had developed for a long time. Visual thinking has been neglected. We have no tools, no grammar to support the visuals. I'm trying to work on that. So what I've done is I've created something that I call the 6 by 6 rule. The idea says, neurobiologically, we see the world according to 6 pretty discrete pathways of information types. What's and where's and when's and how's. So my thought was, if that's the way our visual mind neurobiologically is wired to see things, we ought to be able to draw pictures of our ideas that feed each one of those pathways exactly what they're looking for. So all we have to do is say, if I'm talking about people or things, I'm going to draw a little portrait. like little icons of those things. If I'm talking about number, I'm going to draw a chart that shows number. If I'm talking about location, these things are overlapping or these things are distant, I'm going to draw a map to show their spatial location. If I'm talking about sequence, I'm saying, oh, first Bob did this, and then Mary did this, and then Charlie did this. The picture that I would draw would be a timeline, because all a timeline does is put the sequence in individual order. And then I think the last one, probably the most elaborate, is when I'm trying to explain to someone a complex system or a complex cause and effect chain, which is virtually impossible to follow when I'm describing it in words, I draw a little flowchart. We start here. If this happens, it goes over here. If nothing happens, it returns to its original state. If we apply some other influence, it goes to this other thing. We end up in a different state. That's when we draw a flowchart. So the idea is, if you can understand what we're saying, which picture to draw falls logically out of that. And that's the core of my books, the 6x6 rule. Giving a great presentation is really hard, I think, for two main reasons. Number one, we're often afraid to give a good presentation just because we get stage fright. The idea of getting on a stage in front of people is pretty terrifying. And the second one is from the audience's perspective, they're pretty terrified of being talked at as well because most presentations are so bad. So there's two things we've got to fix. We've got to fix how much fun we have as the presenter giving it, because if we're having a good time, then the audience will have a good time, and they won't say, oh, please stop. They will say, oh, can we have more? Can we have more?